Coming up on Tech News Weekly, Mikah, Sargent, and Jason Howell talk to Karissa of Engadget about Instagram CEO Adam Mosseri's discussion with the Senate. It's all about the impact that Instagram has on its younger users. Then Sam Abuelsamid of the Wheel Bearings podcast drives in so we can chat about Tesla's latest safety concern. It has to do with driving and playing at the same time. Not great. Then we round things out with our stories of the week. First, hackers who are hacking into printers for receipts to leave an interesting message, and I provide a little bit of tech support for the holidays. So we've got a lot to check out. Stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 212, recorded Thursday, December 9th, 2021.
This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by IT Pro TV. Start or advance your IT career with the wonderful instructors of IT Pro TV. Visit itpro.tv/TNW for an additional 30% off all consumer subscriptions for the lifetime of your active subscription when you use the code TNW30 at checkout.
And by Barracuda. Every 11 seconds, there's a new ransomware attack costing companies millions of dollars. Barracuda says, don't pay the ransom. Build your ransomware protection plan now. Go to barracuda.com/TNW.
And by Stripe. Whether you're an online or in-person retailer, software platform, marketplace, or subscriptions business, visit stripe.com to learn more about how Stripe can support your business today. Hello, and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am one of your hosts, Mikah, Sargent.
And I'm the other guy, Jason Howell. It's good to see you, Mikah. Good to be here with you this morning.
Jason.
As we peruse through this December of craziness. Man, I feel like everything's swirling. Suddenly, every year I think December's going to get easier, and it doesn't.
Alas.
Alas, here we are again. But I think this top story is really interesting. Instagram CEO Adam Mosseri actually addressed the Senate yesterday in a hearing that focused on the service's impact on its youngest users. And there's a lot to talk about here. So joining us to talk about this hearing is Karissa, returning from Engadget. Welcome back, Karissa. It's good to have you.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. So let's maybe go a little bit earlier than the hearing itself, because this didn't just start yesterday. Really, this has been a conversation that's been happening around Instagram and its impact, its influence on teen users and even younger, kids who are using the service. Let's talk a little bit about the impetus for the hearing. And I think, largely that happens to be the whistleblower revelations that happened a few months back. Can you set the stage for that?
Yeah. So, when the whistleblower disclosures first started coming out in the Wall Street Journal, one of the first stories, and I think this was the story that has resonated the most with lawmakers and other officials who are, already trying to regulate Facebook, was that Facebook had done a lot of research into Instagram and how it affects teen users and specifically the impact it has on their mental health. And, some of the findings there were that teens who were already, experiencing, problems with their mental health, they said that, in some cases, Instagram made it worse, that the app could make them feel bad about themselves. It could exacerbate some of these, very serious issues that they were already experiencing. And so I think what we saw was a lot of lawmakers really seize on that as kind of proof that Facebook has known that it's, bad for teens and has a negative impact on, its youngest users, and has, chosen to really not do much about that.
Yeah, and really, on and on in this conversation. We keep hearing about algorithms and, the way the algorithm is picking content. And for these younger users, all it takes is looking at a handful of, let's put in air quotes, the wrong profile. And then suddenly everything is, spun out of control and they're seeing things that could be very detrimental to their health. So lawmakers demanded that Mosseri appear before them to really answer a lot of questions that they had about the service's impacts on teens, on kids, on their internal research, all this stuff. Before he appeared before them, however, he, the day before, posted an announcement, announced new controls for these users. What are a few of these features, and what was did this have any sort of influence or direct impact on what happened the day following with the subcommittee, do you think?
Yeah, so they announced parental control features so that parents can effectively set a time limit for how much time their kids are spending in the app, 10 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, something like that. There was also a kind of nudge feature so that if, you're kind of falling into one of these sort of rabbit holes where you're just really looking at the same kind of content, for a very long time, you might get this kind of nudge to sort of move on to something else. And then they're also going to be testing a feature that kind of further limits the ability of adult users to contact teens who they don't know, so that they won't be able to, mention them or tag them in a post.
Yeah, and all that good changes. Some of those changes seem to be kind of it seems like a lot of these services that are kind of going through similar evaluation of what they're doing and the impact that it could have. They're all kind of landing in the same place, which is okay, well, we got to have some time limit controls here. We got to maybe have some video or photo that appears. It's hey, you've been doing this for a while. Don't you want to take a break? I don't know how effective these things are, but they seem to all be landing there. Another thing that you wrote about was, and this was during the hearing itself, Mosseri's mention of the return of a version, and I put that in quotes because that's exactly how he said it, a version of its chronological feed in the future. Do we have any idea what version actually implies here? Is it, maybe we're making too much out of nothing, out of a single word, but what would this feature help in the long run?
So we did actually get some clarity from Instagram after Mosseri made those comments. So it's not going to be, we're not going to go back to 2015 Instagram where everybody has a chronological feed by default. But what they're going to do is it's going to be more similar to how Twitter handles this. So how you can toggle between, the algorithmic feed and the chronological one. So there's going to be, a home feed, which is presumably the algorithmic feed that we have today. And then there's going to be a feed called following, and that will be the accounts that you follow in chronological order. And then they're also going to add a favorites feed, which will sort of rank, accounts that you choose to prioritize, like your close friends higher up.
Okay. Well, that certainly helps. One thing that I'm reminded of, though, in my use of Twitter's version of this is I swear, and maybe I'm misunderstanding how this works, but I swear I put it on chronological and then I open it up later and it's back on the algorithmic feed somehow. So, in my mind, it's if I want one thing, I just want to lock it there. So hopefully they do something along those lines. You also wrote about how many of the senators actually created Finstas, which are these, basically created on the fly accounts, essentially fake Instagram accounts, to see what kind of content their own fake teen Instagram profiles were actually going to have directed at them. What was the content that they ended up with? What exactly did they see, and did it present kind of troubling outcomes? Did they detail exactly how they were doing this? Because, it could be that they were just really going out of their way to get bad content thrown at them versus doing it a little bit more innocently, I guess.
Yeah, it was interesting because, I think this is something that a lot of journalists and other people who are trying to understand how Instagram's algorithms work and how it surfaces content, they've done things like this for a while. So in one case, one senator's staff actually found a bug, which is pretty interesting. So this was Senator Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee, and they created a new account that was supposed to be a 15-year-old girl. But instead of the account settings were set to public by default instead of private, which was a change that Instagram made over the summer as kind of a safety feature. And then during the hearing, Adam Mosseri said, that was essentially a bug. They had, kind of mistakenly not enabled that feature for accounts created on the web, and they were going to fix it. So, that was sort of, I think, telling that, it's just how inconsistently these policies can be, even when they try to make changes and improve the safety. And then in terms of content, I think we kind of got a look at sort of they sort of experience these kind of rabbit holes that we talked about earlier, where Richard Blumenthal said that they, started following a few accounts that were related to eating disorders or searching for, content related to self-harm. And then very quickly, all of the recommendations were overtaken with, this kind of really disturbing content, anorexia coaches, things that really were promoting disordered eating and things that would obviously be very, very troubling to see, in your teenager's Instagram feed.
Absolutely, putting gasoline on the fire, essentially. And you wrote a little bit about this. Mosseri really seemed to kind of push back on the amount of, let's say, eating disorder content. He seemed to kind of minimize, well, it's actually this very small portion of what you can find on Instagram. But it turns out, like, what we keep experiencing and understanding time and time again is that even a small percentage of something on a network this large is a lot of people getting exposed to that content, right? And you even wrote that this really, to a certain degree, illustrates Frances Haugen's point about how that small amount of harmful content can spread broadly on the platform. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Adam Mosseri cited Facebook's transparency reports. They put these out every quarter. They give percentages for the prevalence of various types of rule-breaking content. So in this case, I think he said he thought eating disorders was about 5 out of every 10,000 pieces of content, or something like that. But the thing you have to remember with Facebook is there's billions and billions of posts every day in hundreds of languages. So even if you have a small percentage, that turns out to be a very large amount. And then, there's also questions about how accurate Facebook's percentages around this are. When you think, especially when you start looking at posts in other languages, or, these areas where they're not as good at detecting this stuff or, identifying it, these numbers could, even be much higher in some cases than what they have put out there.
Yeah, that's pretty troubling. Now, I was under the impression that Instagram for Kids was done, but you had written that there was some pressure during the hearing to end it, and that Mosseri seemed to kind of deflect or not answer, or I'm not quite sure. What exactly is the status with Instagram for Kids? I just thought that it was like, that was a bad idea, we're moving on, but maybe I'm getting it confused with something else.
Yeah, so it's officially paused indefinitely. They've said that they're not working on it, and there's no plans to further advance it or put it out. But when he was asked directly, like, will you commit to ending this completely, like not just completely shelving this project, he didn't answer directly. He said that I will commit that if we do launch it, then it'll basically be impossible for younger kids to use this without parental consent. So that was a very different answer than just, saying, yeah, we're not going to do it. He basically said, yeah, well, if we do it, I promise, we'll, do it safely and do a good job.
Got to keep those options open. Got to keep that door open, if only for a little bit. You completely close it, and it's really hard to open it again. So apparently that's what's going on. And then finally, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that so many of these other hearings have been more spectacle and, kind of people pointing and laughing than actually useful. A little embarrassing to watch at times. Even the last one, where Finsta came up and that ended up being kind of a gaffe on the part of the people who were leading the hearing. But this kind of seemed like it was a little bit different. Like it seems like with some of the hearings, and this one in particular, they're getting more effective at maybe understanding the technology, but really kind of kind of holding the feet to the fire. But do we feel, or do you feel like this hearing is any different from what we've seen in the past? Does this lead to an impact, some sort of major change? What do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. On one hand, we did see they stayed, everyone in that room, I think we saw them stay a lot more focused on the issue that they were there to talk about that day than we have maybe at some prior hearings where they've had some, executives there. Everybody was really focused on questions around policy and what they're doing to, protect kids. And, there was talk of specific regulations and, legislation potentially that they might want to bring about. And we also saw a bipartisan agreement. At the end, Richard Blumenthal, who's a Democrat from Connecticut, came out and said, I agree with Ted Cruz on this. And, we don't often agree on these things. But so there does seem to be some agreement in moving forward with this. On the other hand, we still don't know exactly what shape that will take. They talked about a few, the Earn It Act, and I think there's some other proposals out there for how they might address some of these issues. But it's still Congress at the end of the day. It takes a very long time to get these things done. So I still don't think we know exactly what will come out of this, but it seems pretty clear that there is, definitely an appetite to, there's definitely a will to get this done, and there is agreement from both parties, which, is a lot more than you can say about a lot of other issues that that they deal with.
Yeah, absolutely fair statement there. Well, Karissa Bell, really appreciate you taking time this morning to talk with us about this. Karissa, of course, writes for Engadget.com. If people want to follow you online, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter. And I'm usually live tweeting hearings.
Okay, awesome. Excellent. Yeah. So look for that. Find Karissa Bell on Twitter. Thank you so much, Karissa. We'll talk to you soon. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
All right, up next, Tesla's latest safety concern. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by IT Pro TV. It's a wonderful time to be in IT. If you're looking to break into one of the many IT careers out there, or hey, you're already a seasoned IT professional, IT Pro TV has something for each and every one of you. IT Pro TV has the certificates you need to be desirable to employers and to level up in your current positions. IT is constantly changing, and IT Pro TV keeps up with all the new technologies and certifications. The best part is you can watch it in 20 to 30 minute increments, so it's definitely going to work with anyone's schedule. They have 7 studios and film Monday through Friday with their enthusiastic edutainers. They have the most up-to-date content with every vendor and skill. Their courses go from the studio to their course library in 24 hours. That's incredible. And they make sure you're prepared for your exams with their virtual labs and practice tests. To wrap up 2021, IT Pro TV is focusing on Python for December's theme. The weekend of December 11th and 12th is their free weekend featuring courses Introduction to Programming using Python, Python Programming, Object-Oriented Python, Python Data Model, Python for Security. Holy moly, I've got to go and watch those for sure. Start or advance your IT career with the wonderful instructors of IT Pro TV. Visit itpro.tv/TNW for an additional 30% off all consumer subscriptions for the lifetime of your active subscription when you use the code TNW30. That's itpro.tv/TNW and use code TNW30 for an additional 30% off for the lifetime of your active subscription. IT Pro TV, build or expand your IT career and enjoy the journey. Thanks so much to IT Pro TV for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. All right, folks, if you're watching this, don't freak out. You're going to see that clock behind me change times to an earlier time. That's because earlier today, I got to talk with Sam Abuelsamid about, well, I'll let myself explain. So stay tuned. And I am pumped to be talking to Sam Abuelsamid of the Wheel Bearings podcast this morning about an interesting bit of news I saw regarding Tesla and a safety concern that it has. Welcome back to the show, Sam.
Hey, Micah, it's always good to talk to you.
Yeah, good to chat with you too. So
you say there was a safety concern with Tesla? I can't imagine that. That's never happened before.
Yeah, I guess I should say the latest safety concern, huh? The company is known for introducing some things that maybe folks would say, hey, not necessarily a great idea. In fact, this morning I just learned that there's a difference between the National Transportation Safety Board and the, the National Highway Transportation...
The Traffic Safety Administration.
Traffic Safety Administration. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so the NHTSA actually has power while the board can kind of just make suggestions. And both of them are kind of looking into Tesla with this right now. So let's talk about what this is. There was a New York Times piece that went out talking about Tesla releasing an update over the summer that gave the car, I guess, the ability to have games be played on the screen while the car is in motion. So I was hoping first you could explain, for someone who's maybe never been in a Tesla, heard much about Tesla, what there are games? What is this?
Yeah, so this is something Tesla's actually done for several years. They've had a number of games that are built in, that you can download into the head unit, into the infotainment system in the vehicle. And this is actually very useful on an electric vehicle because unlike with a gas vehicle, you go to a gas station, you can fill your tank in a couple of minutes and be on your way again. Often with an EV, you might be sitting there for 20, 30, 40 minutes, and a lot of times, chargers might be next to a store or a mall or something like that. You can do some shopping, but if you're just on a road trip and you don't want to do any shopping, you might want to have some way to occupy some time, while you're sitting there waiting for your battery to charge. And so they started putting games in there. They've had things like Asteroids and Doom, and a variety of other games, and they also have media streaming apps like Netflix. You can actually use Netflix on the screen in the Tesla, so you can watch watch your latest shows on there. Traditionally, that's been restricted to only using it while the vehicle is parked, which is fine. If you're using it while you're sitting there waiting for it to charge, no problem at all. This most recent update apparently started enabling the games to be played while the vehicle's in motion, and apparently the argument is that the passenger can play the games, but this is a bad idea. It's a really bad idea, especially when you consider the way it's laid out in there. The screen is in the center of the car, and to play the games, the passengers probably got to kind of lean over a little bit to do that. So they might be intruding on the driver's space while they're supposed to be operating the car. So just bad ideas all around, and anything that doesn't restrict the driver from doing anything with the screen while driving is generally unsafe. This is why, traditionally, ever since we've had touchscreen navigation systems in cars, they've always, when the vehicle is not in park, you can't use the touchscreen to enter a destination for your navigation. You have to either use voice recognition or stop the car, park, and then you can tap on the keyboard on the screen. So I don't know why Tesla has done this, but hopefully NHTSA and NHTSA is the agency that does motor vehicle safety standards and does regulation and enforcement. NTSB is an investigatory body, so they investigate crashes to try to find the reasons, and then they make recommendations to agencies like NHTSA and the FAA and other agencies for what, if anything, should be done to prevent that in the future.
Yeah, I was reading in this Times article, and they said that this year we've seen the highest total traffic deaths that we've seen since 2006. In the first 6 months of the year, there have been 20,160 deaths from traffic crashes. And again, given that that's the highest total since 2006, I'm kind of curious, of course, this piece is around distracted driving. And there was one person who said that right now it's about 10% of traffic accidents that get attributed to distracted driving, but the person said that they could see it being as high as 50% because often what happens is the investigation doesn't look to distracted driving, but looks to different, more easily proved reasons for the person to have had an accident. What is it? Is it these kinds of features? Is it car infotainment systems? Is it texting and driving? Kind of, what are your thoughts, being a big car person, on what is leading to this kind of uptick in crashes this year?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of factors. Certainly in 2020 during the pandemic, the early stages of the pandemic, one of the things that did lead to a significant increase in crashes last year, despite actually having fewer miles traveled, was that because there was less traffic on the roads, people were driving faster. And when you drive faster, if something goes wrong, you're more likely, to have a crash. This year, but we've also seen a more general upward trend in fatalities in certain areas over the last several years. Part of that can certainly be attributed to distracted driving, but there's other factors as well. Because of the shift towards more SUVs and trucks from lower cars, visibility is more challenging for drivers, seeing outside of the vehicle. And so one of the big areas where we had an increase in fatalities is pedestrians and cyclists, because it's actually harder to see them. And when you start to layer these things on, worse visibility, more likelihood of distraction, whether it's texting or using the touch screen or messing around with a recalcitrant voice recognition system in your car. All of these things contribute to drivers' attention being taken away from the road. Even just a touch screen by itself requires more attention from the driver than perhaps just reaching down and twisting a knob to adjust the temperature or turn up the radio volume or things like that. And in the recent infrastructure bill that was passed by Congress, one of the things that was in there was a directive to NHTSA to develop regulations that would require some sort of device in the vehicle to try to prevent drunk driving. And what that is most likely actually going to turn out to be is actually a driver monitor system, similar to what we have, in Leo's Mach-E. He's got infrared cameras in there for the hands-free driving assist that's coming to his car. GM launched this several years ago with their Super Cruise system. So it's a system that looks at the driver's face and eyes to make sure they're watching the road and try to get their attention back if their attention wanders away. That can certainly help with drunk driving, but it can also be a huge boon to avoid distracted driving or drowsy driving. Drowsy driving is another big factor that, again, there's rarely just one factor in a crash. It's usually multiple things that come together. If there's just one thing, usually drivers can avoid a crash. But when you start to get multiple factors at the same time, that's when things tend to go wrong.
Now, you mentioned infrared cameras as part of the system, I think you said from GM. I'm curious, is this something that Tesla offers? It's my understanding that Tesla's cameras are sort of standard optical cameras, the ones that look at the person while autopilot is going on.
Yeah, Tesla doesn't use an infrared camera. So the way these infrared cameras function is very similar to, in principle, to Face ID on an iPhone. It's using an infrared emitter, which is what Face ID uses. It's lower resolution because it's not trying to authenticate. It's only trying to look for your driver's head pose and position to make sure they're watching the road. Tesla only uses a standard RGB camera, optical camera. And it's also mounted off in the center next to the mirror. And it's also not on all their vehicles. It's only on the Model 3 and the Model Y. The Model S and X don't have that at all. I'm not sure if the updated ones do, but the older ones don't have that. And the problem with those cameras is when you're driving at night, when there's low light conditions, or if you're wearing sunglasses, they can't necessarily see your eyes. They can't see where you're looking. And the infrared sensors can actually see through dark sunglasses, see at night, and see where your eyes are, which is really important, because among the other things, in addition to distracted driving or drunk driving, one of the advantages of this type of sensor is, it can detect, for example, if you've had a medical emergency, if you've had a heart attack and your eyes are closed, or a stroke or a diabetic incident,
Right.
all of these things can be fairly easily detected with this type of sensor. And you can't necessarily do that with just an RGB camera.
That makes sense. Yeah. And so I guess my biggest question is so Tesla offered no response to the New York Times on this piece. The NTSB has suggested that Tesla switch to infrared cameras. The NHTSA or NHTSA is currently investigating these in-dash games, but Tesla doesn't seem to be very interested in making these changes, at least as it stands, at least as it is. Is that a sort of company decision, do you think, or is it more about cost cutting? Is it about, somebody who buys a Tesla should be free from any kind of regulations that don't need to be there, so to speak? I'm just curious if it's sort of a cultural choice where you can kind of buck the rules that you don't want to follow, or if it's just a matter of, Tesla's trying to meet a price point and an RGB camera is easier to include instead of, the infrared system. What are your thoughts on how this is all kind of working out?
Yeah, at Tesla, basically the only rules that matter are the ones that Elon makes. And any other regulations he doesn't really care about. And a big part of the Tesla mystique, for Tesla fans, is this kind of maverick approach of the company doing things differently. And a lot of the Tesla fan base, these sorts of things, appeal to them. Part of the way that Tesla grew, was appealing to really tech savvy customers, that like the idea of having things like games, being able to play Doom on the screen in your car. That's something that has helped build up Tesla's appeal to a lot of customers, not to everybody, but to a lot of customers. This same thing applies, to their approach to automated driving systems and driver assist systems. They basically just do whatever they feel like, and don't worry about any regulations.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, for sure. And that was kind of my curiosity there, is if this seemed to be kind of until it's absolutely a law that's required, this is not something we're going to futz about with. And especially given that it was originally the case that the games were not able to be played unless the car was in park, but that feature was updated to give what they said was passengers. And I do want to be clear that for folks who are listening, it pops up a little thing that says, these games are meant to be played by everyone, but right now it should be played by the passenger, and then you confirm that you're the passenger. Of course, I can remember growing up, I had a family member who installed a DVD player in their vehicle and drove back and forth between two cities regularly and would watch shows on it while they were driving. So, there are ways to kind of get around this, and people who choose to say, oh yeah, I'm definitely the passenger.
As a way around this, for example, Jeep earlier this year launched the new Wagoneer. Mm-hmm. And one of the things they did is there's actually an option for a third screen in the front. So you've got the instrument cluster display, the center touch, the center infotainment screen, and then another display directly in front of the passenger. So that while you're driving, the passenger can actually watch videos. And it's the screen has a filtering system on there, so that from the angle that the driver's looking at, they can't actually see it.
That's clever.
So it won't distract the driver. If Tesla wants to, allow passengers to play games, put another screen in there that's just for the passenger, and have that sort of privacy filter on there, so that the driver cannot get distracted, or use the camera, use the monitoring system in there to look not just at where the driver's looking, but look at their hands and make sure that the driver, if you see the driver trying to use the game, you disable it. if it's the passenger. I mean, there are technical ways to do this, to allow the passengers to play the games. Although even if you did that, it still would not be a good idea to have that in the center screen where the driver can see it, especially because on the Model 3 and the Model Y, that's the only screen they have. There's no instrument cluster. That's where the driver looks, to see their speed and, various other controls. That's their instrument cluster as well. And so they are inherently going to be glancing over there at times. So, it's just not a good idea.
Yeah, all around, it sounds like not a good idea. Well, Sam, Abuelsamid, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day today to talk to us. If folks want to follow you online and check out all your great work, what are some places they can go to do that?
They can check out the Wheel Bearings podcast at wheelbearings.media, where we talk about the cars we're driving and some automotive technology and news stuff every week. My day job as a principal analyst at Guidehouse Insights, you can go to guidehouseinsights.com or just look up my name on Twitter and you'll find all kinds of links to stuff I'm doing. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. My pleasure, Mike. It's always great to talk to you. Good to talk to you too. See you later.
Sam's awesome.
Delightful.
Yeah. Happy you got to chat with him. We couldn't bring him on for the live show. So Mikah, you recorded that earlier and I'm really happy about that because anytime we can get Sam on the show, it's a good day. Cool. Coming up, hackers it's actually kind of a question mark as far as who's doing this, but someone is taking over receipt printers at businesses and ultimately using those printers to empower workers to quit or to speak up. It's really interesting stuff. We're going to talk about that next. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Barracuda. Every 11 seconds, there's a new ransomware attack, and they're taking just a huge toll on organizations that the U.S. government is now actually classifying them as terrorism. That's where we're at right now. According to 2021 Verizon Data Breach Investigations report, ransomware has more than doubled year over year. And you probably noticed this too, right? Just from the fact that there's way more stories about it. We're talking about it on this network all the time because it's that much of a problem. It's a huge threat. In its most recent Threat Spotlight research blog post, Barracuda identified and analyzed 121 ransomware incidents from August 2020 to July 2021. And in doing so, saw a 64% increase in attacks year over year. So it's not just in your mind, it's really ramping up. You've seen the news, oil pipelines, universities, corporations, all paying millions of dollars in these cases. Barracuda actually says don't pay the ransom. Instead, protect yourself and your company before a ransomware attack occurs. So step one, attacks start with an innocent looking email, right? They're trying to trick people into revealing really useful pieces of information, things that they can do something with, like usernames and passwords. So you got to train your teams to recognize an attack, and you also got to deploy anti-phishing technology. So secondly, secure your web apps, file sharing services, web forms, e-commerce sites. Often these things have weak points that the hackers are actually looking for, that they know of, and they're actively looking for these things in those services. Once they're in your applications, then they go after your business data, and so you need to protect your applications. That way they can't get onto your network. 3, back up your data, right? Today's backup solutions make it simple, make it fast to protect archives, and backup or restore an entire server or individual file so that you have them, that you can always resort to them if you need to. You can quickly recover that data without paying the ransom. 3 important things there. Barracuda says don't pay the ransom. If you do play your cards right, you won't have to. Build your ransomware protection plan now before they strike. Go to barracuda.com/TNW for Tech News Weekly. That's barracuda.com/TNW. And we thank Barracuda for their support of this show. So, okay. So I feel like this isn't the first that we've heard about this, but my story of the week is about this kind of this moment right now. There's a growing energy around empowering workers to kind of take a fresh look at where they are, where they're working, and do so through the lens of through equality, worth, are you getting paid enough, all this kind of stuff. Lorenzo Francesca-Bicchierai, who we've had on the show many times from Vice's Motherboard, actually wrote about this movement, and a few things are going on with this story. So we'll start with a subreddit, which you may or may not have heard of, called Anti-Work or Anti-Work. It's been getting a lot of attention lately. I know I've heard Leo talk about it on the shows from time to time. I've been following the subreddit just because I'm fascinated by what's going on here right now. But in this subreddit, Reddit users are sharing screenshots, they're sharing stories, whole bunch of insight into some of the sometimes shady things that employers are doing or with their employees at their jobs, right? And this subreddit really is all about employees kind of finding the support that they need in each other to say, hey, my job sucks, and here's the reason why. Here's what my boss did this last time, and the community rallies around that person and says, okay, well, there's a lot more for you out there. Why don't you just quit? And so there's a lot of posts around sharing their DMs with their bosses, screenshots showing that their bosses are demanding that they work when they aren't actually required, and making ultimatums, threatening them. Ultimately, the employees are upvoted on Reddit by a large degree when they show in the thread how they've resigned, how they said, oh yeah, well, take this job and shove it. They kind of spell that out. Everybody, pats them on the back. It's a great thing. The community really is empowering other members to just realize that those employees have rights, and sometimes those rights are impeded on by the people who employ them. So that seems to be what the subreddit is all about. I don't know. Have you do you use Reddit at all, Mikah? Is this a subreddit that you're familiar with?
No, I'm not really a Redditor, but I have heard of this subreddit in particular. It's popped up in the news a couple of times, so I'm not surprised, that there's a link there. Pretty popular one.
Yeah, it's getting a lot of attention right now, and I think also specifically because we're also talking a lot about in the technology world, employment in general, but in technology and journalism. There's a lot of energy around unionizing, workers' rights, in all of these different facets. So I think it's kind of like a perfect storm, right? All that stuff is happening. It's already on our minds and our attentions to make sure that people are, that these workplaces are more inclusive, are more worker, friendly to their workers. And this subreddit is kind of like a part of that movement. I think it's kind of attached to it. Well, now there are more and more reports showing how fax machines, which I kind of forgot that, do businesses still have fax machines? Maybe they need to. Maybe for that one time that they need to receive a fax. But probably more commonly, printers, receipt printers, things like that, at many different random businesses are suddenly having anti-work manifestos being printed out on them. So imagine a boss comes into work, flips on the lights, looks over at the receipt printer, and there's a long sheet of paper, and it's a total manifesto just waiting to be discovered, probably by the staff, but also by the boss, right? It says things like, are you being underpaid? You have a protected legal right to discuss your pay with your coworkers. Poverty wages only exist because people are willing to work for them. Things like this that, a worker might read and be like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't realize that I could talk about my pay with my coworkers. My boss said that that's not okay to do. Turns out you have a legal right to do that. No one seems to know where these printouts are actually coming from. It could be, maybe it's an employee that works there that's pulling off a prank that's actually, part of the anti-work subreddit, and so is printing these out to see what happens. Maybe it's a wide-scale effort on the part of people from the subreddit to filter out this information and this knowledge to kind of spread the knowledge around what the anti-work movement is all around. Could be someone setting up the subreddit, right? To say hey, this subreddit is doing some really shady things. They're putting their manifesto all over the place. Let's get some attention on this and put pressure on Reddit to shut it down. I just think it's an interesting kind of illustration of where we're at right now with work, especially in light of where we're at right now with the coronavirus. I mean, we've heard so many stories. Like if you go out to restaurants, like I've gone to many restaurants, they all have help wanted signs. They're all struggling to get people to work there. And I think it really just seems indicative or representative of the moment we're at right now, where employees were kind of forced into a position to where they had to step away from their normal. And now coming back, they're like, well, wait a minute, maybe there should be a new normal. Maybe that doesn't work for me anymore, or whatever the reasons or the rationale is. But I don't know. What do you think about all this?
So obviously the hacking is of issue. Trying to find ways to go about doing this that circumvent what's supposed to be done. That's no good. But in terms of sort of this movement and this conversation, I do like the idea of questioning, hey, maybe when things do get back to normal, there can be a change in the way that things are done, where people are realizing, because it should never be the case that someone can make more money by not working and using the programs that we have available to help people who are unemployed. That there tells you that we're not paying people enough money if that is the case. If there are situations where someone realizes, wow, I am getting paid more money to not work than I am getting paid to actually go to work, then we need to do better. And companies need to do better. They need to be better, because that should not be the case. That it should not work that way. So people asking for the basic benefits, the basic rights that they have to be treated like a human being. I can remember working at a place where because I just had this kind of flashback the other day. I was at the store and saw Theraflu, and I had this, it was just this moment where I had this flashback of warming up in my work microwave my cup of Theraflu, because I was sick at work, because I had to be there, because saying you were sick and staying home was not officially a no-no, but certainly unofficially a no-no, and was one of these things where, an unspoken agreement that there's really no finding coverage in that job. And if there was finding coverage, then it was your job to do alone. And one would argue that the way that that's supposed to work is that if you have a manager, it's the manager's job to find coverage for you if you're ill. Not that you need to call around and beg 6 people and tell one of them you'll massage their feet if they will come in for you and work for you because you're not feeling well. So all of these things and the way that the system is set up right now, it needs to change. And if going into a Walgreens pharmacy and seeing that there's only one person working and that the place hasn't been restocked in 9 months because people are realizing that they don't have to be treated like animals is the way that we make change happen, then that's fine. Don't hack a company or receipt printers or something like that. But I'm certainly all for people getting paid what they're worth and being respected as human beings in every situation.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you just said, right? Like the hacking of the printers, obviously, that can be a pretty shady direction to go down. But but I can appreciate the sentiment behind it. I can appreciate the sentiment of here's a way to get direct access to people who might not have thought otherwise about is my situation here fair? Like, is it fair to me and my coworkers? Am I being taken advantage of? I didn't really think about that, but now that you put it this way, now I'm going to if that's the impetus for them to reevaluate and recognize that, hey, they're worth more than they're being paid. They're worth more than they're being treated. Then, I can fully get behind that. But, maybe hacking printers to do the job isn't the right approach, but it's pretty effective, for whatever that's worth, I suppose. So anyways, I think it's an interesting story. And there we go. And by the way, hacking insecure printers is nothing new. It's not like this is the first time we've ever seen something like this. It's just how it's being used to spread this message, I think, is pretty fascinating.
Agreed. All right. Does that bring us to break time?
Yes, indeed.
All right. As soon as I find my window, I will do that. My windows are all over the place. Where are you, Tech News Weekly?
Your 55-inch monitor.
I've got a monitor over here, one in the middle and one below. It's just a mess. So anyway, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with my story of the week, a bit of tech support. But I do want to tell you that this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Stripe. Leaders of adaptive businesses choose Stripe as their payments platform. You want to know why? Well, it's because with Stripe, businesses can easily optimize their payments infrastructure, simplify their expansion plans, and create new revenue streams, all to help them grow and initiate change rather than having to react to it. Those are just a few of the reasons why businesses such as Shopify, Postmates, and Twilio, those big ones, look to Stripe to power their global payments. In fact, Twilio increased its authorization rates by an impressive 10% with Stripe after running an A/B test with multiple global payment processors, while Stripe helped Postmates generate more than $70 million in revenue after increasing their authorization rates. Now, we here at TWiT launched Club TWiT this year, and we chose Stripe for our payment platform. And frankly, all of us here love it because it's seamless in accepting payments and issuing refunds, and we couldn't be happier. Stripe allows you to accept 135 plus currencies and payment methods. We're able to focus on the business of producing high-quality podcast shows, while Stripe handles the business of payments and money movement. Stripe also has an invested interest in our Earth. This is very cool. With Stripe Climate, you can direct a fraction of your revenue to help scale emerging carbon removal technologies in just a few clicks. So, whether you're an online or in-person retailer, software platform, marketplace, or subscriptions business, visit stripe.com to learn more about how Stripe can support your business today. That's stripe.com to learn more and get started today. Thank you so much to Stripe for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. And I wanted to lead into things with a little bit of tech support. So, holiday season is coming up, and many of us have virtual assistants, digital assistants, smart speakers in our homes. And many of us use the one from Amazon, Alexa. And you may or may not be familiar with Alexa having a feature that will announce the day that a package is meant to arrive, when it's supposed to come, when it's been delivered, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you live in a house with other people and you are getting gifts for those other people,
oh boy,
this can be bad. So,
danger.
Yes, danger, Will Robinson, danger. Android Central put together a little guide to help you get your Alexa devices set up correctly. And I'm going to walk you through the steps here. So I've got my iPhone, but this will work on any device that you have. Again, this was on Android Central. You launch the Alexa app, and down in the bottom right corner, there is the More button. You tap on More, and then you choose you scroll down until you get to settings if you don't see it, because you can see I've got see more here, but sometimes that's open for people. So you find the settings with the gear icon next to it and you tap on that, and then you choose notifications. From there, you need to choose Amazon Shopping, and then you need to make sure that the part that says let Alexa say or show titles for items you've ordered, make sure that is in the off switch, on the off position. So here are some of the options here. It says say or show item titles, let the device show or say titles of items that you've ordered. I have that turned off for delivery updates. I do have that turned on for returns. So if I ever do a return, that I can say, hey, this is going to be returned. That says it will also have, you can have it turned on for items that are in your shopping cart that are marked as gifts, or those that might be gifts during major holidays. So you can see that Amazon has actually realized that this is a feature that people might want to set up so that it doesn't notify you for things that may or may not be gifts. I have those all turned off. And then same thing for delivery notifications and returns. You can have those turned on or off. And it goes on from here. I recommend that people do check through the different options to make sure that they've got what they want turned on and what they don't want turned off. Because I, for a while, was getting notifications that I did not desire to have, not because it was spoiling anything, but just because I didn't need to know about special deals from things that you may be interested in. As much as it is kind of a given that if I'm going to have this device in my home, it's going to be a bit of an Amazon advertiser, I like to limit the Amazon advertisements as much as possible. So that is my way of making sure that that doesn't happen. But yeah, I think the big thing there is making sure that you don't have those surprises ruined by turning that off. Now, you, Jason, I imagine, because you talked about using Family Bell, do you have Google's Nest devices in your home? Do you have any Amazon Echoes or other Alexa-enabled devices?
I have no Amazon devices whatsoever in the home. It's just, yeah, we're blanketed with Google Homes and yeah, Nest devices. No screens or anything. Just all the Google, basically mostly the Google Home Minis prior to the Nest rebranding. We filled our home with those, and so we don't actually have, like, I've never had it. I didn't even know that you could do this on the Echo devices. That actually seems like it could be pretty handy, or could totally spill the beans depending on how it's set up. It's almost like they need a mode that you can set it on the fly and say, like, hey, enable holiday mode. And then it will, kind of be quiet on that stuff until the 25th or whatever.
Now,
like that.
Google has a lot of proactive features like reading your email in order to let you know, hey, I saw this tracking number and this device is out, or not device, but this this package is going out today, and let you know that. Does that work the same with the Google Assistant on the Nest devices? Will it actually be proactive in that way, or is it just a kind of visual indicator?
It's a really great question. I have not set up, if the Google Home devices are capable of doing that, of like announcing, hey, we noticed that you've got a shipment, it's going to deliver today. If they are capable of doing that, I apparently have never set it up because I've never once heard them do that. For the longest time, there was Google Home on the smartphone, on the Android smartphones. It was called Google Home. It's so confusing because Google has a million different names that they recycle and everything. So it used to be called Google Home. It had nothing to do with Google Home, the hardware devices. It was just a software feature that ultimately ended up becoming Assistant. And it used to have like a feed that would be really good at doing exactly what you're talking about. It would scan through your email, or it would recognize when an email comes through that's like delivery email or whatever, and it would pop it into that feed so that when I open my phone, I'd look at it, I would say, oh, delivering today, this is from your email. And that was really useful. But connecting to the Google Home, I mean, it may be possible. If it is, I'm not aware of how to do it. And I've never done it because I don't get those notifications or announcements on my Google Home at all.
Gotcha. Yeah, I turned those off sort of the first time I ever saw it pop up, and I've had it off since. But I know that there are a lot of folks who maybe last year for the holidays, they got one of these devices. And so now they are wanting to be able to disable that because they may not have been prepared for that. So yeah, I think it's kind of one of those things that slides by. You may not realize it's going to happen, and then suddenly it does, and you go, oh no, I need to make sure that nobody gets things spoiled. So I just wanted to let everybody know about that, make sure that they were aware of how to turn that off. And again, it works the same on both types of devices. So you can definitely make sure to turn that off.
Just real quick, I'm looking at a CNET article also that spells out exactly like this is a feature that the Amazon Echo devices can do that the Google Home cannot do, which is determine when a package is out for delivery or whatever. It's as far as this article is concerned anyways, it's not possible in the Google Home devices.
Got it. That's good to know. All right. Well, that's that. So I think it's time for your goodbye spiel, Jason.
Goodbye spiel. Goodbye to you. Tech News Weekly. We publish the show every Thursday, twit.tv/TNW. That's where you can go to subscribe to the show in audio and video formats. Everything you need to know is there, twit.tv/TNW.
And by the way, if you want to get all of our shows ad-free, you should check out Club TWiT, because for $7 a month, that's exactly what you get. You get every single one of the TWiT shows free of ads. But that's not all. Not only do you get that, you also get access to the TWiT Plus bonus feed that has content you won't find anywhere else. Behind the scenes, before the show, after the show, outtakes, all sorts of stuff that's not available elsewhere, as well as access to the members-only Discord server. If you're wondering, what the heck is a Discord server? Well, if you've ever used Microsoft Teams or Slack or one of those other online communication platforms, that's a lot like what Discord is. It's a place to chat with your fellow Club TWiT members, but also all of us here at TWiT as well. Awesome place to hang out where we've got people sharing messages right now as we speak. It's very cool. If that sounds good to you, all of that's available at twit.tv/clubtwit. And by the way, we have corporate plans available as well for a discounted rate. It was pretty cool. We recently had a company buy a bunch of seats for their employees as gifts. So, a big old company now has access to Club TWiT. So if you were thinking about giving a gift to your employees this holiday season, or for whatever reason, just to say, hey, you're awesome, you might check out the corporate plan, twit.tv/clubtwit to check all of that out. We also got some feedback that folks wanted to have wanted to be able to support shows individually. So if you are one of those people, if you're not interested in the $7 a month plan, but you just kind of want to support Tech News Weekly, well, if you're on Apple Podcasts, you can do that. You just go to the audio version of the show and you'll find a button that says subscribe. And for $2.99 a month, you will get the ad-free version of the audio feed. And that will be available to you. So yeah, you can check that out and support us directly if you'd like to. If you want to follow me online or check out my work at Mikah Sargent on many a social media network, or head to chihuahua.coffee. That's CHIHUAHUA.coffee, where I've got links to the places I'm most active online. You can check out later today Smart Tech Today, which I record today with Dan Morin. You can check out on Saturdays The Tech Guy, which I do with Leo Laporte. It's a radio show where people call in with their questions and we provide answers. And on Tuesday, I record iOS Today with Rosemary Orchard. We just did an episode on the App Store Awards. So if you're wanting some new apps to download on iOS, you should definitely check out that episode because it's all of the best ones that Apple picked out. We go through them and talk about them. So yeah, you can catch me there. Jason Howell, what about you?
Nice. Keep it simple, at Jason Howell on Twitter. Also doing all about Android every Tuesdays, twit.tv/AAA. And we keep ourselves pretty busy otherwise. So you'll see me across the network. Big thanks to everyone who helps us do the show each and every week. John, of course, at the studio, Burke, John again, everyone who helps us do the show each and every week. We really appreciate you guys. And we appreciate you for watching and listening. We'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
So you got yourself the brand new latest and greatest iPhone or Samsung smartphone because you heard about all of the beautiful photography those things can create. But for some reason, you're just not quite getting it done when you try to make your photos. Or you got yourself a brand new camera because you were interested in getting started in photography, but your little new inexpensive camera still isn't quite cutting it. Well, you need to check out my show, Hands-On Photography, here on TWiT. I'm going to show you how to be a better photographer and a better post-processor, and quite frankly, just help you get the most out of that new camera that's either on your phone or the brand new one that you just got for your birthday or gifts or what have you. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So head on over to twit.tv/hop. That's twit.tv/HOP and subscribe today.